Hello, y'all. Grown Black folks talk. Non-compliance options for Black women in bricklaying situations. I have been very busy this month, writing and preparing for editing my fifth book, Seizing the Crypto Bull Run for Financial Freedom. And so I have been very much behind on certain issues that are happening. There was an alleged attack on a Black woman who decided not to give her phone number. And so allegedly she was hit in the face with a brick. Now, the veracity of that story has been heavily questioned, and there's evidence that such that I have to just say allegedly because I don't intend to weigh in on whether it happened or not. I do not know. What I am concerned with in this video, and I was specifically asked to do this video by Confidence with Love, is what do Black women do in an environment where whether or not this woman was hit in the brick with a face, hit with a brick in the face or not, we know that Black men are setting Black women on fire, throwing them in the dumpsters, and otherwise seriously harming and even murking them for not giving a phone number, for not willing to engage with them. What are some non-compliance options? And the reason I say there have to be non-compliance options, because if we're going to sit up here and we're going to listen, we're going to tell white racists that they are wrong 15 million ways to Sunday. We're talking about, well, if they had only complied with a lawful order, they wouldn't be dead right now. Then we're also going to have to take that same thinking to Black men who think that if a Black woman does not give them a phone number, a smile, or any of her attention, that she just deserves to be hurt or murked. But see, because what we're not going to do is allow Black men to think that they can take white racist behavior and just apply it against Black women and children. That's what we're not going to do. We're not going to put up with that. No. So there have to be non-compliance options. And all of these have pros and cons, serious pros and cons, like everything else. But see, right now, what many Black women think their options are is just to take it and just hope they live for another day and to live in misery, to live under the same conditions that their grandmothers lived under Jim Crow, which is you can go and be minding your own business, and any person who is of the protected class can go and approach you and ask you for anything. And if you choose not to comply, you can be murked. That's the same condition Jim Crow was. If Black women are free, we ain't got to do none of that. So we need to discuss some non-compliance options, and we need to be honest about the pros and the cons of those options, though. And I will tell you which of these makes more sense to me, but they all have pros and cons, and it's up to you and the local Black women that you work with what direction you individually and maybe collectively can work toward. Number one was actually given to us by Confidence with Love. She said that if a Black man was to get aggressive with her after asking for her phone number, she took out her little notebook and said, you ready? 9mm 380. 9mm 380. Now, if you don't know what 9mm 380 is, put it in Google and see what you get. We're going to say that it has to do with Black women exercising their Second Amendment rights as citizens of the United States of America. That involves the right to keep and bear arms. According to Auntie Tiff from Noir Aunties, shout out, shameless plug for Noir Aunties, a much brighter subject. We today, and you'll see it on my community page, we today celebrated Miss Coco Gauff and her becoming U.S. Open champion today. And we took the lessons from that and how she managed to do that in the face of blatant cheating and racist cover up live. We went on and we discussed that. Shout out to Noir Aunties, Confidence with Love, and Black Woman Minding My Business. Auntie Love, Auntie Tiff. Auntie Tiff mentioned as we were discussing all the issues around this that the Black women exercising their right to keep and bear arms have gone up 1,000% in the last several years. So this is definitely an option that Black women are considering. The pro about this is that, once you know that you can defend yourself, you can move with a little bit more confidence. The con about this is not so much a con as it's just a reality that if you're going to be about that life, you're going to be about that Second Amendment life, you're going to have to be about that life. See, most women are small enough so that if you hesitate, that gun could be taken away from you and used against you. So that's number one. You cannot pull that out and not do serious business with it. Second, you have to get both trained in terms of how to use the arms that you are keeping and bearing, and you have to get psychologically ready. And if you should have to do, you also have to know the laws of your state because actions that you take in self defense can also be considered criminal. From every state varies a little bit. So you really have to get up on, if you're going to be about that life, if you don't get up on the things you need to get up on, it has a con big enough to cost you your life. So that's number one. And then it can cost you jail time. So you have to think about uh, the con is the prep work that you have to do first, and then keeping and bearing arms and obtaining them is not cheap. So you have to look at where you're going to get the investment. Now, number two does I'm going to talk in number two about people that are talking about how to do things such that you can use these resources in order to get the things that you need. But 9mm 380 is a choice that billions Black women have because of the Second Amendment. It's just that if you're gonna be about that life, you got to be about that life. The cons of not being about that life is that actually can put you out of here. Either you lose your life or your freedom. So if you're gonna go that way, you have to really go. Number two is like unto it, just a different version. If you were to act in self-defense, where do you lay your head that night that's safe? If you have to go back to the same neighborhood and that person can bond out, you're probably going to be in serious. If that person's still alive to bond out, or this person's still alive to have, has family members who live in the same neighborhood, even if they're not still alive, where are you going to lay your head? And this is why number two also goes into sometimes the best non-compliance policy is to absent yourself from even getting the request. The divestment and hypergamy movement, when they were talking about this back in the early days, we're really talking about absenting yourself from neighborhoods where enough of the men have decided to be terrorists and enough of the rest of the men have decided they aren't going to do anything about that. Just getting out, just leaving, burning the cape and leaving. A lot of divestment hypergamy was like that. Some of it still is. You can find it if you search. Don't get sucked into the constant conversations about what men are doing. No, no, no. You want to look for content creators like we're over it, we're moving on, literally. Because those channels will have resources to help you to get you hooked up to do that. There's also Stephanie Perry and the Exodus Network. That's two different channels, and I'll put those in the links. And what I want you to do is notice the things about location independent income rivers for Black women, and how to go on a gap year with $0. Because if you can manage to get out of the country for a year, you can manage, that's also by definition leaving your neighborhood. If you can get location independent income, enough of it, you can live anywhere with that. By definition, the skills that you learn from, building streams of income will help you be able to move anywhere. It's just you're going to move somewhere else in the United States, you might need a little bit more. But what cost your life? How modestly can you live among people who are not trying to kill you for not smiling at them? What would you give up to have that kind of security? And again, if you're gonna be about that life, you got to be about that life. As someone who lives in a highly gentrified neighborhood, I can tell you, as a Black woman in a neighborhood like this, you get watched because no one wants you to vector some cowardly terrorist in. Certain neighborhoods have very, very strong homeowners associations. So if you choose to move in country, out of the country, you really have to be able to move in your mindset. You really need to be done. I have not covered Miss Shirley Strawberry and her husband Ernesto, but you know, you cannot be bringing along a man who has a record as long as his elbow. You cannot be a vector for a man like that. Him and his other mistresses. You cannot be a vector for a man like that and make this work effectively. If you're going to choose option number two as non-compliance, you really have to be over the whole paradigm. And then there's number three. This is probably the most controversial of all. There is a natural, though highly controversial, nexus to be built between Black women who are tired and want the men who abuse and murk us off the streets for good, and the corporations and politicians who make their daily bread on having private prisons full of Black men. 20% dividends in some cases on that. Folks are putting stuff in lifetime income report and including this in what's called special situations. I found that out years ago. I found out years ago from an article in the Atlanta Black Star how many products are affordable to us. We sit up and talk about China. Well, if our relationship breaks down with China, guess who's going to have to pick up the slack? Prisoners, making between 90 cents and $4 a day. Now, 13th Amendment allows you to be returned to the chattel value of a slave in a case of felony imprisonment. So there is a nexus of men who want those prisons full, and Black women who want these abusers off the street. How be ever? These same men have never proven themselves trustworthy toward Black people in general. Those men want you to fail with your son so that they can get your son to keep it going. And they want your daughter to be broken down enough to breed the next generation of sons that will be there. So the problem with these policymakers, the big con on this side, is that inherently many of these men are not trustworthy. They don't respect Black women either. They need breeders, as it was in the beginning, it now and ever shall be. Unfortunately, when it began in 1800, these men's ancestors and spiritual ancestors, if they're not actually related, brought Black women in here for one purpose: to breed new generations of slaves. And the problem about making calls with corporations and policyholders that are invested in Black men being in slavery and prison is that if they assist you in getting too free, then their whole plan is going to be messed up because you may actually raise children who are in safer environments. You may meet men in these safer environments who are willing to be good bonus dads. People get, y'all, one of the most beautiful songs that ever came out. Color him father, do 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 do. Color him love. It was a beautiful song, and it turns out that was a stepfather, a bonus dad. These young men and women may find a bonus dad who actually knows how to love them as a man and nurture them and encourage them, so these young people will not be available to be prison slaves in the next generation. So the thing about it is, making common cause with policymakers who are saying today that they want to take Black men off the street, you have to always be watching your back because they don't necessarily have your best interest at heart either. Because if you get too free, you're not breeding the next generation. So again, all three of these have pros and cons. I personally favor number two, and I help Black women to a point. I can't get into any details, but I favor and I work with number two. There comes a time when you are tired of foolery, it's time to leave. Some of you know, at least in online situations, when I'm tired of the foolery, there ain't nothing you do to get back. Nope. Bye. Sometimes it's just time to leave. Some things and some people will not be changed. It is always an option to stay and fight. You can do 9mm 380. But it's like, you got to think about what are you fighting for? And once you've done what you need to do in terms of self-defense, can you still live there? Sometimes, yes. Every situation is going to be different, which is why I needed to discuss three different options. All three of them know you really got to be about that life. Like, if you're going to try to play both ends against the middle with policymakers, you really have to be, as someone who's done local politics, no, you really have to be about that life. If you are going to go 9mm 380, and you got to deal with all the laws, all the situations, all the training, all the psychological effects before and after of being about that life, you really got to be about that life. If you're gonna move from everything you've ever known to somewhere that you've never been in order to escape a situation that you need to purge from yourself in your head so you don't recreate it wherever you go, you really gotta be about that life. You know how I'm always saying to y'all, get your life together? This is another way of saying, get your life together. Because here's the thing, in order to give yourself non compliance options, you've got to be able to think differently than you ever thought before. You have to be able to think in terms of, I owe it to myself to no longer allow myself and any children I may have, especially my son, well, my sons and my daughters. I don't want my sons growing up to think that behaving like white racists toward black women and children is okay. And I don't want my daughters to think that this is all that life has for them in terms of their brothers growing up to be terrorists. Mothers, don't let your babies grow up to be terrorists. Don't do it. Because you know they say they're gonna roll up on one of them gonna get real slick and roll up on confidence with love, and she gonna call 9mm 380. Chicks with triggers. She gonna call 9mm 380 for sure. And if San Francisco could get its life together, I might even have to call 9mm 380. Although, like I said, things have been pretty well gentrified here, so I don't deal with it that often. But I got some surprises up my sleeve if I had to. They're not on the 9mm 380, but just saying. But again, knowing what the prevailing laws are, if you're gonna be about that life, so I'm not saying that anybody listening to me has to go and do any of these things. That's not what I'm saying. Because you really have to sit down and think to yourself, number one, I deserve better than to be constantly terrorizing like I'm my grandmother living under Jim Crow just because the people terrorizing me are black men. I deserve better. I need better. I want better. I'm willing to do what I have to do. So whatever of these three options that you choose. Now, it is an option to do partial compliance if you want to. You know, there's a company called Sideline. You can get a phone number that goes with your phone number to hand out. But again, if you're still living in the same neighborhood and this man, one, the number belongs to you, but you're not really picking it up, because he's gonna be mad about that. If you give him a fake number and he calls it and nothing happens, he's gonna be mad about that. If you give him a number that is yours and you don't call him, he's gonna be mad. So it's just like you're still gonna be stuck in the nexus of locale with these gentlemen, possibly, if you're in those neighborhoods. But having every tactical option, if you're somewhere far away from where you live and you make sure you're not gonna get followed back to your house, okay, it might be helpful to have a sideline number. But again, Stephanie Perry and the Exodus Network will tell you what you really want to do is move yourself beyond having to live among terrorists. And they would take American men as a unit, with a few exceptions, and say, these men are people whose best, because Stephanie Perry has said it, she's house sit for people in the United States. And because she's house sit around the world, it amazes her how much labor American men just expect as they sit back and live their best baby lives. And these women are doing this and this and this and this and this. They're trying to get ready for a vacation. And this woman is taking care of all this stuff and all this stuff, and the man's just doing practically nothing. He might make some coffee and he may remember to offer her a cup. All this that has to go on. So Stephanie Perry is like, none of these men respect your full free life at all. Leave. That's number two, take it to its furthest extreme. None of these are easy options. Because when you live in Jim Crow conditions, you don't have any easy options if you're going to be free. And of course, different black women will choose different things. And I'm sure there's ideas I haven't even thought about yet. So I've given you three non-compliance, and I have allowed for one partial compliance. I'm not saying to do any of these things. I'm saying, okay, here are some options for you as a free woman. No matter what anybody thinks, no matter what fantasies they may be living out about trying to be a personal Satan and have all this worship and all this adoration and all this obedience. You are free. You are free. You ain't got to do none of that. But you do have to then figure out, okay, if this is the actual conditions I'm living under, then what do I need to do to best exercise my freedom? So we've talked about 3.5 options, non-compliance options today, really. That's all I got. I mean, you may see it on the climb later. I do plan to try to get out on the hill tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Um, what we did on our aunties, again, shameless plug, when our aunties, our celebration of Coco Golf was so elevated, and to have to then come through and do this subject, but I do have to come through and do this subject because this is situations that Black women are facing every day with their children, and so it was necessary to put these ideas out for the masses. All right, hopefully I'll see you with a more, when we're on the real hill, I'll have a brighter subject to talk with you about. Y'all have a good morning. And whenever you see this, y'all have a good day or night. And thank you for listening. Bye.